Hello, my name is Kevin Zerbe. I'm the State Mitigation Strategist at the Washington Emergency Management Division, and I'm going to talk today about a recent study that I and my colleagues conducted on the spatial and temporal changes in Washington's wildfire risk since 1970. This poster and presentation was done for the 46th Annual Natural Hazards Research and Applications Workshop held by the University of Colorado Boulder's Natural Hazards Center, and we also have a full paper on this study that is currently in review. So, like much of the western US, Washington is seeing more and larger wildfires in the state, with large fires in this case being defined as any fire that burns at least 100 acres. The literature on this topic conclude that climate change, specifically warmer temperatures and drier conditions, is the most likely driver of these larger, more frequent fires. As hazard mitigation practitioners, we need to understand where large fires are most likely to occur to determine if climate-driven changes in wildfire activity are also leading to changes in wildfire risk for our communities. To do this, we analyzed a compiled data set of wildfire location data from the Washington Department of Natural Resources that covers the years from 1970 to 2020, so a full 50 years worth of wildfire location data. Figure 1A here shows the location of all wildfires in our data set with over 47,000 fires, and Figure 1B are just those fires that burned at least 100 acres, a total of 639 between 1970 and 2020. So we analyzed those 639 fires using a variety of spatial statistical tools available in the ArcGIS Pro version 2.5 software. Our first step was to use a density-based clustering algorithm to determine if the clusters that seemed apparent upon our own visual inspection actually were clusters. And we found that there are two primary clusters of large wildfire incidents in the state, one in central Washington along the dry eastern slopes of the Cascades, and another in the forested section of northeastern Washington. We then used the optimized hotspot analysis tool to get a better sense of the statistical significance of those clusters, aka hotspots, or areas that may be high risk, as well as if there are any cold spots in the state. Because we wanted to see if there are any changes in large fire occurrence over time, we created a three-dimensional space-time cube to help determine any spatiotemporal changes in fire occurrence. And lastly, we performed a directional distribution analysis to find out if the area where a majority of acres burned by wildfires has changed over time in space, as well as if the number of acres burned has changed at all. And we did this directional distribution analysis at the decadal scale. So figure 2 here shows the results of our optimized hotspot analysis. We created this map by first counting the number of large fires that occurred within each hexagon grid cell, and then how many large fires occurred within a 29-mile or 47-kilometer radius. That value was compared to the average value of the state to determine values significantly higher or lower than average. Higher values are redder in color, with lower values in shades of blue. All red hotspots are found east of the Cascade Range, which serves as a divider between western Washington's traditionally mild, wet climate and eastern Washington's more arid climate. This map could serve as a traditional risk map for mitigation planners and practitioners who often use previous hazard occurrences to determine risk, defined here as the potential for impact, since it combines location data and statistical significance in the forms of hotspots and cold spots. It doesn't, however, suggest that wildfires only occur in hotspots and never occur in cold spots. It also doesn't tell us anything about whether the areas most at risk to wildfire has changed over time. Figure 3 here is a two-dimensional projection of the space-time cubes we created, which determines statistically significant trends in wildfire activity for each hexagon grid cell. Those shaded purple are experiencing significant upward trends in large fires since 1970, with cells in green seeing downward trends. You can see here that only areas east of the Cascades are seeing upward trends, while the most significant downward trends are west of the Cascades, suggesting that at some point in time, we used to see large fires there more often relative to the state average, but that is no longer the case. This could be because there are actually fewer large fires occurring in those areas, those green areas specifically, or because the areas east of the Cascades are seeing such large increases that they are skewing the average for the rest of the state. The directional distribution analysis will help us figure out what is happening. So figure 4 here is our directional distribution analysis. Each ellipse you see here, 5 in total, represents the area where a majority of acres burned occurred in a given decade, with more recent decades in darker shades. So each layer gets lighter as it goes back in time. You can see here that in 1970 to 1980, we had quite a large area we had to draw around in order to capture a majority of the acres burned that decade, including a number of locations west of the Cascade Ridgeline. That ellipse, the lightest shade at the very bottom of our layers, includes approximately 28,000 burned acres, which is more than 50% of the total acres burned between 1970 and 1980. The darkest ellipse, for the years 2010 to 2020, is clearly much smaller. In fact, it is 62% smaller than the 1970-1980 ellipse. And not only that, the 2010-2020 ellipse contains over 1.1 million acres burned that decade. So in essence, we're seeing a massive concentration of large wildfires in Washington over time, and this concentration is centered over the north central part of the state. So we interpret these results as meaning the area most at risk to large fires is that north central region, specifically the counties of Douglas, Chelan, and Okanagan, even though we have other wildfire hotspots in the state. This is important information for mitigation planners and practitioners that we wouldn't have had without using the spatial statistical analyses available in a common GIS software. And we think this makes a strong case for more of us in the mitigation field to employ these tools for hazard risk analysis. Our hope is that our results illustrate just how important it is to identify how the location of risk may be changing over time when it comes to prioritizing the use of limited resources available for risk reduction. However, the methods we used do not tell us what is driving the spatiotemporal changes in risk, though that is the next step for us. Now that we know where the risk is located, we want to determine why those areas are risky by diving further and employing spatial regression models that can explain the risk drivers behind our data. Thank you for tuning in, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions about this study or the other work that we're doing in Washington State regarding hazard risk assessment, and take care.